Wildfire hazard assessment, and there's a, let's see if I can do this. I'm going to jump up here. Do we have a copy of that thing on this screen? Copy of this?
No, that's
Oh, okay. So I'll go back. In your handout, in your packet, there's a couple of sheets look like this. One is there's like a building in the middle and some information around it. And the other one,
right-hand side of your packets.
inside, on the right-hand side of the packet. And then next to it, there's this form computing Viewscape hazard scores. And what I'm going to talk about is just, I went home last week after we had a meeting, and knowing that I was going to have to chat with you all about this, I went home and said, well, it'd be better if I did it on my own place so I could tell you a real-world situation. And it kind of scared me when I got finished. Questions? No, wait a minute. I'm going to deviate from the slideshow. I'm going to talk about the wildfire hazard assessment. You go out there in your yard, you're looking around, you say, okay, what's my hazard? On this form here, it shows you the front, the right, the back, and the left of your house. And what I did is I stood in front of my house. As it turns out, my house faces east, so I stood there and looked at it. It says there's two columns, vegetation and slope. And there are numbers next to characteristics. Light vegetation, number is 1. Down to heavy vegetation, number is 3. Next to it is slope. If you're on a flat slope, the score is 1. If you're on a steep downslope, the score is 3. Logically, what we want to do is look at all 4 quadrants of our property from our house and put a score together so that you can say, okay, this side is pretty safe, but this side has me nervous. And all we're doing is prioritizing where we should take our hazard reduction efforts first. There are a couple of, you can look at the fuel and you can say, is it light, medium, or heavy? Well, what does that mean? I think Frank sort of described light is probably nothing but low grass and very few shrubs and far apart and limbed trees pruned up to 10 feet. That would be light. Heavy would be a situation I'm describing for you on my neighbor's property, which is about 50 feet away. This happens to be an absentee owner. Lives in Santa Cruz. She doesn't come up very often. She's not very friendly. So my work is cut out for me. And in that particular case, it's ceanothus, buckbrush. And it's at least 10 feet tall. Once you get past 5'6", everything looks tall to me, but it's pretty high fuel, and the brush is just tangled in there, and you just can't even get into it. I don't know how I'm going to handle it once I get friendly with the neighbor. I'm not sure how I'm going to handle it. But that is heavy fuel. So what I did on my Viewscape hazard, I looked at the front, which in this particular case is the south side. My vegetation on the front is medium. I need to do a little bit of work out there. The slope is right on a flat, it's just flat. So the score for that is 1. 2 is heavy or medium vegetation. 1 is a slope. So my final score is 2 times 1. Final score for that particular south side of my place is 2. I'm not too worried about that. I do know that I have to do a little pruning out there, but I'm not too worried about it. The west side, the neighbor's side, vegetation is 3. It's heavy. The slope is a moderate downslope. It drops off down towards Sherlock Creek. It's the west side. So I put those 2 scores in there, 3 times 2, came up with a 6. That makes me nervous. On top of that, the predominant wind direction, which is not on these sheets, but we know, because we've been living there, where the afternoon breeze comes from. comes right up over that pile of buckbrush. Goes right off of Whitlock Road, up Sherlock Creek, and right up to my place. So what I did, and this is just a helpful guide. There's no rules and regulations. CDM has probably reviewed this and said, yeah, it looks accurate, adequate. You all can use it and get people feeling where they need to prioritize. What I did is I said, okay, on that steep slope to the west where I got heavy vegetation, I got a score of 6. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add a point to it. Matter of fact, I'm going to add 2 points to it because of that wind. So what I did is I said, okay, I got an 8, score of 8 there. That's the part that makes me nervous. Then I went ahead and looked at the north side, fairly steep slope. I've got the vegetation under control, but there are some 100-foot ponderosa pines back there. The breeze also comes up that direction, but not nearly as intensely as from the west. So I made a score of 6. And then on the east side, it's flat, not much vegetation. I got a score of 2. So now, if and of course, intuitively, I knew all this. I didn't have to fill this silly thing out. I knew it, and I know I've got this troublesome neighbor who's not going to be real happy about me climbing the fence and brushing her property. Although I'm going to work on that. But intuitively, I knew that that's my danger side, is that west side. And I also know that on the north side, where I also have some breeze, and it's a steep slope, and I've got those 100-foot tall ponderosas, I've got to get in there and do some more work. So those are the 2 spots that I'm going to work on this winter. As a matter of fact, I work on those every winter. As a matter of fact, I don't think that brush, it just comes back. I've been cutting that manzanita for 30 years in the same place, and it's just still there. What have I been doing all this time? It just keeps coming back. So given these 4 scores, it's obvious that my priority is this side to the west. The situation, and we're going to talk a little bit later this afternoon about groups, neighborhood groups, fire-ready groups, and I think maybe at that time we'll wait until then to talk about how you deal with the troublesome neighbor. But I've got some ideas on that. So anyhow, this is a guide for you to go out there and look. As I said, intuitively, I'm sure that everybody in this room knows where their trouble spots are. My particular piece of ground is 7 acres. It's typical of many of the small subdivisions up here. There are a couple of neighbors who, and I'll talk about more about this afternoon when we talk about groups. A couple of neighbors, one particular family down there are kind of, let's see, how shall I say, they're sort of hippie, and they like their privacy, and I don't really know what goes on inside the private area. It's none of my business, but they have huge amounts of brush. I mean, it's just horrible, just horrible. All of the neighbors around them have done an exemplary job of clearing the brush and making it fire safe. These folks, I don't know if it's a wildlife habitat thing, or if they're trying to hide something, or if they just want things to be natural. I'm not sure, but it's a scary spot. Fortunately, all of the properties around there have been mitigated and been brushed, and they're fire safe. Okay, this is a good guide. I hope you use it, look at it. I don't know what that means. Okay, so our design goals for getting your place fire safe is you got to know about slope, topography, vegetation aspect. In my particular aspect is it north, south, east, west. In my particular case, the west aspect, and when I look at that aspect, that to me interprets to me wind direction. You've got to look for hazards. I mean, I love those pine trees, those big old pine trees out back, I love them, and they're great. But I'm not going to like them when they're just black skeletons. I also have a couple of dead ones out there that a friend of mine from out of state who has read about and heard about fires that we experience all the time said, why don't you get rid of that? Well, it's just plumb full of critters. It's an excellent habitat for birds and squirrels, and every once in a while you see a cat going halfway up, which isn't necessarily good because that hawk on the top is waiting for that cat to come up. Slope, fuel models, they can be used by average people without too much training. Training is happening here. There are a number of volunteers here, who will be more than happy to come and visit you when you put this together and see if you're accurate or not. All right, this has been, Frank went over this pretty specifically. The Viewscape is something that I don't think that he talked about Viewscape. He talked about the defensible zones, Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3. Viewscape is when you look out, you're sitting on the deck on Saturday morning drinking coffee, which I missed this morning because I'm here with you folks. You're looking out there and it's, you know, we all have what we like. That's why we are in our particular case. It's a beautiful view. And just imagine it with all of that stuff burned up. It's not so nice anymore. So the Viewscape is not necessarily the defensible zone, Zone 1 or Zone 2. It's what you see out there, what you like. And I would encourage folks to recognize that they have, and right here, this is a prime example, 300 feet, approximately 7 acres, Viewscape. That's what my place is, it's 7 acres. The Viewscape is all the way over my neighbor Al Thorpe's place and aims over towards your place, Mary. And the Viewscape is what we like to see. That's why we're there. We're not really messing it up by limbing trees. As a matter of fact, when you limb those trees, the ponderosa, the lower branches on the ponderosa pine, you get more Viewscape, you can see more. So keep in mind, Viewscape. That's what this does. Helps you prioritize which direction to go, which direction is most important for removing fuel and improving the Viewscape. In the very center of this form, we talk about flat level area, hilltop, ridge line, bottom top, middle of slope, gullies, and so on. Those are all factors that need to go into your hazard assessment. Topography is very important, as Frank was talking about. One of those houses there that was on the top was fairly well protected, but it was on a ridge top. The ponderosa pines on the slope caught fire, came right up, house was lost. So even though it was on a flat top, topographically speaking, the vegetation was just too much on the slope behind it. Wind direction is extremely important. Aspect is a factor in this particular part of the world. East-facing and north-facing slopes tend to be cooler and moister. West and south-facing slopes are hotter, drier. And I live on a ridgetop where the vegetation on the north side is entirely different from the vegetation on the south side. I can look over there on the south side, the warmer, drier slope. I see blue oaks and lots of annual grass and buckbrush. I turn right around and look in the opposite direction on the north side, and I see ponderosa pines, black oaks, perennial grass, a lot of native perennial grass, and manzanita. So just the difference of aspect from the north to the south creates an entirely different plant community. Ignition source, I know where the ignition source is going to be. It's going to be down on Whitlock Road. The telegraph fire came right up the canyon behind my place, and I was one of those ornery guys who didn't evacuate. I said, no, I'm going to stick around. I have a friend who had lost their house because and I'm not encouraging you to not evacuate if you're told to do so, but these folks left. They had a redwood deck, an ember landed on the deck caught fire, the house burned. I've got a redwood deck on 2 sides, and I just said, nah, I think I'm going to stick around. Even though an hour later we had no power, which means I had no water, had an ice chest with liquid refreshments in it, and I had a broom and a couple of tools. So I figured, well, worst case situation, I'll be there to protect the deck and protect the house, put my life in jeopardy. My wife was mad about that. But the direction of the, in that particular case, the fire started down in the draw, and it was coming up. The fire truck came in, and in this case, what's his name? Gordon Dulce, I think. Folks might know Gordon. And he said, Progner is not looking good. You can see the flames right down there. And I said, yeah, what do we do? He said, well, if I knew how to get down there, we could go after him. And I said, go down Whitlock Road, go to the second right, it's called Black Oak Bridge, go back in there, all the way at the end, there's a Powder River gate, bust that gate down there, and you can get right to it. 20 minutes later, I looked down there, and I could see bulldozers and fire crews down there, and my goodness, I was happy that I stuck around to give them directions. And I'm not pointing fingers at them for saying that they don't know where they're going, but I've been on that same spot for 30-some years, and so I knew how to get down there. The aspect, the ignition source, that's the nervous thing, is the ignition source. It's going to be down on that road, and there's a lot of houses, and there's a lot of chimneys, and that's where it's going to come from. Awful lot of fuel. There's that buckbrush, got those white flowers, smells good in the spring, burns like crazy. My driveway, I'm sorry to say, won't look this way for long. Looks like this. I've got brush encroaching. A neighbor driveway just to the north of me, it's actually a tunnel. I'm sure a fire crew wouldn't even think about going in to see if the house was defensible space, because they just look at that tunnel and they wouldn't even bother. This is very nice, open. I have a neighbor who's working on this diligently. These branches now are gone. It's raised up, the canopy is raised up 10 feet, looks great, easy to defend. Slopes, steep slope, 45% is 100%. If you've ever been on a roof, 12 and 12 pitch, that's 100% slope. If you can walk on it easily, walk easily on it, even up to a 20% slope, it's easy to walk. Topography, here we are, ridge tops, gullies, slopes. I happen to be number 2 on a hilltop. And when you start filling this form out, those are the kinds of things that you want to be able to put scores on. This is the vegetation rating here is very light. You can see it's just open. The fire isn't going to do much. It's going to just race through there and no problemo. Not so good here. It's kind of medium, and this is what I see on the one spot. As I look out the front, I see a little bit medium. This is really not good. Heavy slope or heavy vegetation, and most of it's dead. The stuff down below is dead, and it's going to just explode. Oh, there's my form. I should have started at the end and worked back. Okay, so there's the form. There's your score sheet. My defensible space score over on the left, I gave myself a 2 because I'm on the middle of a slope ridge line, and then I filled all these out. I'm going to quit talking right now, but I'm going to say one more thing. We don't add these up. When I first looked at this with John and other folks, I said, well, where do we put the total? Well, it's not a total. What it is, it's just to prioritize where your worst case situation is. Is it the front of your house or the back of your house? Wherever your score is the highest, that's where you should be working. I got nothing else to say. I'd be more than happy to entertain a question. Good. Next guy gets an extra minute. Yes, ma'am.
All right, I just wondered what score, what number we're aiming for. So, like, is 1 to 3 is good, 4 to 6 is
That's a good question.
that kind of
That's a good question. And again, I think it's intuitive. We don't have anything written down that says this is the score that you should shoot for. You want to shoot for the lowest score you can get. I personally came up with a score of 6 on 2 aspects. That makes me nervous. Score of 6. You could potentially have a score of 9 if you had a steep slope and heavy vegetation. That's really scary. I would say if your scores on this thing are 4 and lower, then it's probably not a high priority. If they're higher than 4, I would suggest that that's where you want to concentrate your efforts. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that there are some volunteers that are willing to come out to your house and help you do an assessment. Is that?
Yeah, well, I'm stepping entirely out of school when I answer that. But I personally, I'm a director with the Resource Conservation District. There's a couple more directors here. We have associate directors, a lot of knowledgeable people. We have some staff, the NRCS, and of course CDF, and I'm not going to speak for them. CAL FIRE. God, sorry. I would, and there are a lot of phone numbers in the packet. I dare say that if you pick the phone up and call any one of those folks, that you could get. I'll be happy to come in. And I'm not a professional at this, but I know I can tell you if it's something to worry about or not.
Sure. The Fire Safe Council actually comes out and does defensible space checks.
There you go.
Who may not be familiar with the clearance. So I don't know if our number's in the packet, but
Yes, on the back of the vegetation management package, booklet, brochure, whichever you like to call it, is contact info.
wonderful. So yeah, give the Fire Safe Council a call. We'll get you on schedule and come out and check it out for you.
Thank you. Up to you, boss.
Alrighty. Thank you, Jerry.